On Friday, the Special Investigating Unit handed over a report on the investigation of corruption and fraud relating to the procurement of personal protective equipment meant to deal with the coronavirus outbreak in various government departments. The irregularities are said to be estimated to about 15 billion rand. He later signed as the president 3 proclamations authorizing the SIU to investigate the allegations of maladministration and corruption at the Road Accident Fund, Overstrand Municipality, and at state entity Alex School. On January 1st, 2022, the president will receive the report from the State Capture Commission. Are we well on way to make prosecutions on some of these findings is the question. Well, joining us for this discussion is Executive Director for the Accountability Division at OUTA, Stefanie Fick. Advocate Fick, good morning. Lovely to speak to you. What goes through your mind when you hear this and this rampant corruption that is going on in this country?
In all honesty, I think I have a emotional reaction. I think that is really one's first reaction, is despite the fact that we know about state capture, that we haven't prosecuted some of the individuals in state capture, in fact, most of them, that during a pandemic, we are faced with yet another wave of corruption when it comes to PPE in our health department. You know, I just cannot think that people would do that to people in a very vulnerable position. But, you know, after that emotional sort of response, what it tells me is that our fight against corruption is not on a level in South Africa where I think it should be. Slowly but surely, I mean, thank goodness for the SIU that has made inroads into some of the corruption. But we need a stronger NPA. We just lost, you know, Deputy Director of the public of public prosecutions in the ID division, and we need to see a whole lot more accountability. So the question is, you know, how are we going to achieve that?
Well, that's the question I was going to ask you. So if you don't mind answering, how do we achieve accountability?
I think that we need to sit up. Firstly, let's start off by, I think people need to understand, you know, what is the consequences of corruption, that the consequences of corruption is so far and wide. I want to use a simple example, just the petrol and the petrol levy and all of that. Because we have rampant corruption, people do not want to invest in our country, and then just the one part of the petrol levy, you know, goes up because the petrol price goes up because of the rand-dollar exchange. You know, we cannot build the amount of schools that we want to. You know, the health is a problem. We cannot give health care to each and every South African in South Africa. So what do? I think Parliament needs to sit up and make sure that for example, departments like the SIU, like the NPA, don't cut their budgets. Do not give more money to personal protection than you give basically our corruption combatants. Look at your party political funding. 3.8 billion rand that went to political parties in the past, you know, since, if I'm not mistaken, sort of the past 10 years. It's an enormous amount of money. Can't we, you know, despite the fact that there's provision made in the Constitution for these types of spending, guys, can't we up our democracy by spending that amount of money, or some of it at least, in order to make our institutions stronger? The SIU has done a lot, but I think they can do more. The NPA has done something, but they have to do a way lot more in terms of holding those individuals to account. Parliament should take their blinkers up and hold the executive to account. And then, you know, we need to have a will. And maybe it is about education, and then I come back to my first point. Understanding what the effects of corruption is on each and every person. Our unemployment rate directly related to corruption. We as civil society need to stand together and say, no more. And the politicians, the people sitting in Parliament who's supposed to speak on our behalf, need to sit up straight and say, this is what we're going to do, and not just talk. Let's do.
Now, state capture in many ways implies a loyalty by a system to a cause, and that cause obviously contrary to our own expectations as citizens and as South Africans. Now, how do you break the hold that this system has? Because I think that's what it is. There's a massive hold. It's not about a single individual going into office, but it's about a system that is in place that is continually siphoning funds and a well-oiled machine, if you will.
That's why I say that, except for we refer to political will, and I think there is, the politicians need to sit up straight and say, I'm going to make myself available to be chosen during an election, and then I will do what is best for the country. But yes, that's a problem. And not everyone apparently buys into the fact that, you know what, I can do so much for this country. But I think civil society has an enormous role to play. Corruption, it's got two parties. There's always two parties, the one saying, I will give you money, and the other one doing. And I think if more as civil society, as business, we sit up straight and say, we're not going to allow that the next time a policeman stops you and you are willing to buy that cool drink, think twice. Because if there's no market for corruption, corruption will die down. And I also think that there is a responsibility on South Africans to go and vote and make sure that whoever you vote for, you can hold to account so that they can, they need to work in your best interest. But in the meantime, I think that there's also a lesson for us as civil society, as South Africans. Don't be part of corruption. Say no to corruption. Because if you all say no, then, corruption doesn't have a foot to stand on.
Advocate Fick, final question. Now, I read in my intro later that the President has signed 3 proclamations authorizing the SIU to investigate allegations of maladministration. Does this not take away from the independence of the SIU if the President has to authorize? Is that the process? Is that the standard process?
Yes, it is. In terms of legislation, the President has to sign this. They don't have, they can't just investigate everything that they want to. I think in the past this has worked well. I think they are underfunded, they're under-resourced. They are supposed to be, the prime forensic investigation unit that makes sure that, these types of maladministration is investigated. For me, it is can we afford not to have it? And I think the SIU has done a brilliant job. Advocate Matibi, I salute you because despite, problems that you have done an incredible job in this fight against holding people to account. But we must also remember that they don't have the mandate to prosecute. They can civilly stop contracts and they can civilly go after money and disciplinary and give advice as to who should be obtain the advice so that people can be disciplined. But at the end of the day, it is a chain. It remains a chain to say that, government departments must then also do their job and make sure, I'm just thinking of listing the companies that's involved in corruption so that we don't do business with them. And getting rid of the people that makes themselves guilty of, in a disciplinary scenario, makes themselves guilty of unethical behavior. We're sometimes too stuck on, someone is guilty of a crime. What about ethics? What about ethical leadership? Leaders we can look up to. There are so many young individuals out there that I'm sure that if they are educated and, at this present moment, that would love to do business with government and are not willing to say yes to corruption. But to come back to your original point, I don't think in general there's a problem. with the president signing this. Their mandate is a little bit different than the police, who has the mandate to investigate criminal acts and corruption and all of that. And even them, we saw with state capture that they were totally, they made sure that their job is sort of curtailed and nothing was happening. So what is the answer? I think ethical leadership is that there's nothing wrong with the process. There's nothing wrong with our legislation. It is ethical leadership.
And on that note, we have to wrap this up. Stefanie Fick, thank you so much for your time. Executive Director for the Accountability Division of Outer, Stefanie Fick.